Welcome back, everybody. This is Magic with Randy. I am Randy, and today I'm going to kind of break down what the modern metagame is looking like so far as we get ready to go into the RCQ, or sorry, not RCQs, but RCs that are coming up. We have the European one coming up here on the 25th of January. That's just about 2 weeks away from when this video comes out. Then we also have the ones coming out in February and March for here in the States, and then a bunch of the other ones as well. I apologize, I don't know those schedules as well. As always, guys, though, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, you like how I discuss and break down the format, just leave a like in the video, subscribe to the channel, it really helps me out, and leave a comment down below if there's anything you like that I'm doing, anything you don't like. Love to hear your criticism, feedback, all that fun jazz. But today I thought I'd just kind of do a overall metagame of Modern. I've been doing, kind of the metagame breakdowns of Standard, and this is more just kind of to dip the toes into what's going on with Modern. We had the bans and the unbans happen. Now let's kind of see where this has ended up shaking out. And so I'm just doing for the last 14 days. I think this gives us a kind of a better zoomed in ability of like what's going on in the format, what people are playing a lot of, what people aren't playing a lot of, things like that. Now, to everyone's probably disarray, misery, basically, Boros Energy is still the most played deck in the format, despite, having Raptor banned and having, what's the other card I'm looking for? The One Ring banned out of it. Turns out Energy's still good. Who would have guessed that? That being said, Dimir Murktide is also right up there. Really, it's like the Frog Tide is what you'll get called a lot. Excuse me. Playing like the Psychic Frog, things like that, along with Murktide on the top end. Eldrazi ramp. Turns out that even though we took the ring away from the Eldrazi, they are still here to play. Unfortunately, Grinding Station has made a big resurgence, I would say. Mainly it's made a big resurgence because of Mocked Opal being unbanned. That's really kind of lifted the deck, spread its wings, and be able to win without needing a creature on the field. And Amulet Titan is still seeing a lot of play, mainly because that deck never actually gets anything hit out of it and just gets, more cards for it. Obviously, it did lose the One Ring. That was a card that it was playing. But it's still got Green Sun Z in the back. So, whenever Titan loses something, they always just gain something right back. So, always good to see. But those are like the top 5, most played decks here in the last 14 days. Now, does that mean they're the best decks in the format? Even the Titan probably is. But besides those, we're seeing some other decks still see play. Mardu Energy is seeing play as well. Right there at, 4.2% of the meta. I will argue that I think, if you're going to play Energy, Boros Energy is way more consistent and seems to be better positioned to play. The black doesn't give you enough of an edge, and still casting Blood Moon is still a good card in, 2025. Then we have our Ruby Storm and Belcher. I think Belcher is probably one of the best decks you can play in the format right now. It has a game against everything and kind of loses to itself more than anything else. You have the counter spells to stop interaction. You have your, I win button with Charbelcher. So, just a good card overall. Same thing with Ruby Storm. That being said, I think that, Charbelcher is better than Ruby Storm. It plays through hate a lot easier, in my opinion. Charbelcher does than Ruby Storm does, and Ruby Storm can fizzle a lot more to itself, which sounds weird to say, but I could be wrong. I haven't played Ruby Storm since their newest changes. They did add, some have added Artist Talent and Faithless Looting, so it does help them kind of churn through the deck. Yawgmoth is still a deck, still doing well. Definitely benefited from the bannings with the ring gone now. That really helped them out. And then Crashing Footfalls has come back too because of the ring being banned. So kind of crazy to see. Modern I think is very wide open. When you look at the tournament results from the Magic Online scene, it does seem like it's kind of mushed more together as far as like what the grinders are doing. But when you look at any kind of events that happened for paper events or anything like that, we do kind of see that the metagame is open up more than just what grinders are playing. That being said, we're getting ready to go into the RCs, so we could see a lot more of what we're seeing from Magic Online, where we're seeing quote unquote the best of the best decks. The European RC will kind of be our first real big tournament when it comes to Modern, are kind of like real big first showcase of what we can expect to see and what we kind of can expect from the Modern metagame. Obviously, in the Spotlight Challenge, they did have, I think, a 5K and a 10K Modern event, so that did help kind of shine some light on paper. But also, playing in a 5 and 10K doesn't mean you're going to have all the grinders out, right? People who qualified for the RC are usually a little more grindy, usually have more grinders at those type of events, to where, like, they came there, they qualified for this tournament, they came here to qualify for the Pro Tour, and win it. You're going to see a lot more competitive mindsets at, like, the RCs, especially as you go later into the rounds, especially moving into day 2. You'll see, kind of the cream of the crop really rise up to the top. So that being said, I did kind of want to break down and go over a couple of or at least the top 5 most played decks right now, and just kind of explain why they're seeing play, what's changed about them since the bannings and unbannings, just kind of going over what has gone on in the metagame essentially. So first up, we'll start with Boros Energy. We're still looking at pretty much the same core of the deck, right? We're still running 4 Guided Souls, 4 Ocelot Pride. We're back onto Ragavan now because we did have some spots open up with the Amp Raptor leaving. Still on 4 Johnny, still on 4 Pelagius. Still running Galvanic Discharge. Thraben Charms now made his way into the main deck kind of as a staple, if you will. We're still running Static Prison, Goblin Bombardment. Fable of the Meter Breaker is now also made its way in. Showdown of the Skulls is another card that's making its way in. This is not like a guaranteed card you always see, but like this card, Fable and the Meter Breakers, are kind of like the cards to recuperate from losing the ring, right? These are 3 and 4 mana, we're going to gain card advantage type cards. Now this is a list that got 3rd place in the Modern Challenge on the 9th. So, I'm trying to pull from decks that are doing well, right? Or decks that did well in the tournament. So the Boros Energy lists are not solved by any means. They're still trying to figure out how they have good card advantage now that they lost the 1 ring. Obviously, there's still plenty of good cards like Fable. No one thinks Fable is a bad card, right? No one's like, oh, they're playing Fable? Well, we really fell in far. Like, no one's surprised, right? Still a good card. And then the sideboards are always, varying changes depending on what you think you're going to see in the metagame. So don't take these to heart by any means. But this is, still doing well. It didn't literally lose a whole lot in the sense of Boros Energy. Boros Energy is honestly, the biggest card it lost was the 1 ring. I think that's a much bigger hit to this deck than Amp Raptor. Obviously, Amp Raptor was a good card, but the best thing you're doing with Amp Raptor was turn 2 going into the ring. So they lost the ring, they lost Amp Raptor. They're still doing just well, or still doing well enough. This deck has not fallen off. That being said, I do think this deck will probably have a bigger fall off when it comes to the RCs. This is my personal opinion. I don't have any kind of data to back this up. I do think that Boros Energy probably isn't going to translate super well into the RCs, just because I think people are going to realize that, people still have know about this deck, are still trying to beat this deck. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with Boros Energy, if it still has a big percentage of the meta when we go into the RCs. I think it might lose some of that meta. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of my opinion. I think people are going to be trying some more different things, or trying out different things when it comes to actual paper events. Moving on to the second most played deck, which is the Dimir Murktide, or what I call and what a lot of the other people call it is the Frogtide, because we're playing Murktide Regent and we're playing Psychic Frog. Playing Oculus, super good card. Great card to discard with our Psychic Frog, because we're playing the Unearth to buy back for 1 mana. And then this list was playing 2 Bowmasters. Bowmasters has been in and out of this deck. We've seen as many as like 4 copies in this deck. We've seen as little as 0. There is no best build or for sure build of this deck right now. Pretty much all the decks are running, 4 Psychic Frog, 4 Oculus, 2 Murktide, spells, and lands. That's the core of the deck of what we figured out. This one was running Consider, able to get the card selection, help put your Oculuses into the graveyard. Fatal Push, good removal spell. Spell Snare, obviously a good card right now when Dimir Murktide and Energy are the 2 most played decks. Being able to counter Psychic Frog for 1 mana, being able to counter the 2 drops in Boros Energy for 1 mana, obviously good. Thought Scour, a way to put cards into our graveyard. 1 Thoughtseize, which is a little different. 4 Unearth, like I said, to be able to buy back our Psychic Frogs and our Oculuses. 4 counter spells to stop our opponent from doing anything. 1 Shoot the Sheriff to kill pretty much any creature in the metagame. 1 Tainted Indulgence. This player is playing it more likely to just get more card selection going. Draw some extra cards. 2 Force Negation to be able to stop things on our opponent's turn for free. And 2 Sink in the Super to bounce any kind of problematic permanents, as well as being additional lands. And 1 Neil Spellbomb for Graveyard Hate. So pretty well-rounded list as a whole. Not too surprising to see, this deck continuously do well. It has a good matchup against most of the decks going in. Counterspell gives you kind of an edge against everything in some degrees, as well as being able to have a fast clock with Psychic Frog and Oculus, just being able to continuously poop out dudes with Oculus. Psychic Frog keep getting to continuously draw cards. You can discard your things that aren't useful in your matchup out of the way of your hand, make Psychic Frog bigger. Also helps with Murktide Regent. You can grow Murktide Regent, so if you have a Murktide Regent on the field, and then you can eat 3 cards to give Psychic Frog flying. Once you give it flying, so if you eat any instant sorceries, it's going to grow the Murktide equal to the number of instant sorceries you eat. You can keep giving your frog flying, keep eating instant sorceries, keep growing the Murktide, and just do a one big swing and kill your opponent. It is kind of a nice thing. They're playing 18 lands, pretty self-explanatory. Like I said, the sideboards keep changing, so don't take any mind to that. But this is the second most played deck in the format, and it's not too surprising to see why. It's essentially a blue-black tempo deck, blue-black counterspell deck, blue-black, whatever you want to call it, type deck. Has low to the ground creatures, has counter spells and removal spells to stop what your opponent's doing, and just attempts to get there. And it does very well. I think this will be a big part in the RCs coming up. As if you're unaware, RCs are open deck lists, which means when you sit down against your opponent, you hand your deck list over to your opponent hands their deck list over to you. You get 2 minutes to look at their deck list, see what's going on, get to know what they're on. So if your opponent is on, Boros energy, that you can kind of keep you want to keep more like removal spells in hand. You're going to want to try to get an early frog down or Oculus down to interact with your opponent type situation. So you can kind of mulligan and sculpt your hand to what you need it to be to interact with your opponent, which is always a good thing to be on if you're playing in these open deck list tournaments. So I definitely think this Dimir list is going to gain a lot of stock or a lot of percentage points being played at the RC. I expect this to probably have a higher percentage than Boros energy going forward when we look at the RC's metagame breakdowns and stuff like that. We'll just have to kind of wait and see what actually happens. Obviously, that's just my opinions. I could be vastly wrong. Could turn out that someone figures out that Dimir Murktide is trash and there's a deck that just beats it every time, 100% of the time, and this deck doesn't see play at all. I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to become a more popular deck when we get into the paper tournaments, especially because they're open deck list. And being able to have a deck that gives you so much different card selection is really useful against against whatever your opponent's playing. Be able to get the cards you need for sure against them. Now, this is the third most played deck. This is Eldrazi Ramp. This is a deck that kind of existed before the bannings. Didn't necessarily get better because of the bannings. Definitely got worse as a whole. Did lose the One Ring, which was a huge boon for these Eldrazi decks, especially with them playing, where are you? The Ugin's Labyrinth. Being able to have 2 mana on turn 1 to play a Talisman, be able to go turn 2 the One Ring by having 1 from here, 2 from Ugin's Labyrinth, and 1 from whatever the other land you played, was a really good thing for them. They were able to get a lot of card advantage super early and just kind of spiral out of control. So obviously they did lose that angle of it. The deck's still not bad by any means. Clearly, it's third most played deck. It's still doing well. A lot of it is now revolving around selling Mycospawn, Spawn, being able to go get a land from your deck when you cast this spell. So even if this card gets countered, you still get to go get a land. You're continuing to ramp with that. You get the Devourer of Destinies, being able to kind of stack the top of your deck essentially. Now have no Drifter as their card advantage because you can evoke it for just 2 and a blue. Or whenever you cast it, you get to draw the spells. Or, you can hard cast it for 7. Still also being a 7-drop, working well for Ugin's Labyrinth. So it makes sense. Worldbreaker is kind of their reoccurring creature at this point because you can sacrifice a land to bring it back. Breaker of Creations, just kind of another 7-drop that you can put underneath Ugin's Labyrinth, and it can also gain you a bunch of life out of nowhere. And then, of course, they're playing 3, and Recruit the Promise Ends. This is kind of one of the best cards in the deck. It lets you take control of your opponent's next turn, kind of screw them over. Essentially, you're going to try to put them in, use as much of their spells against them as you can, kind of just do everything you can to stop them from what they're doing. And then we get to play Ancient Stirrings and Malevolent Rumble to kind of dig for anything we're looking for. Total Return to deal with the little creatures, and then when we cast one of our big things, deal with any kind of medium-sized creature by dealing 5 damage. And of course we have to play for Kozilek's Command. This card is probably the best card that you can play in Eldrazi at this point. It just does everything you want it to do. It makes X or O1 colorless creatures you can sacrifice for mana. It lets you scry and then draw a card. It lets you exile a creature with mana value X or less. And it lets you eat up graveyards. It just does everything you could possibly want and more. And then, like I said, we're playing 4 of the Talisman, 2 of the blue-green one, 2 of the red-green one, and Utopia Sprawl is just another way to kind of, there you go, the other way to kind of like mana ramp, essentially. You know, so just a solid deck overall, nothing too crazy to write home about, but it is putting up numbers, doing well. Having that blue splash really for being able to play Consign to Memories and Mystical Disputes is really good in this meta that we are in right now when Dimir Murktide is doing so well in these challenges and putting up so many numbers. Alright, that brings us on to the Grinding Station. This is probably the biggest deck that gained so much from the banning. That being said, it gained so much because it got Mox Opal back. So the biggest problem with this deck as a whole is that you're trying to essentially go off, or you're trying to win through essentially milling yourself out with with Grinding Station. So you sacrifice an artifact, target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into the graveyard, and then whenever artifact comes into play, you may untap Grinding Station. So the combo used to be Grinding Station plus Mox Amber plus legendary creature, usually a blue legendary creature. So you can tap Mox Amber for blue, tap Grinding Station, sacrifice Mox Amber. Oh, I'm sorry, and then Underworld Breach. Sorry, I forgot about the Underworld Breach. So with Underworld Breach out, you get to, recast your spells or escape them by paying their cost plus exiling 3 cards. So obviously Mox Amber costs 0. So you would, Grinding Station, mill or destroy the Mox Amber, mill 3, recast Mox Amber, untap Grinding Station, do this until you mill out your entire deck. And then hopefully you had a legendary creature out, so you were tapping for blue, and then eventually you just rebuy back Thassa's Oracle from your graveyard, win the game because, 0 cards in the library. Thassa's Oracle effect cares as long as you have X or less equal to your devotion. So if you have 0 cards and they kill your Thassa's Oracle even in response, you still had X or less, so you were still doing well. You're still winning the game. So the problem with that is you had to have a legendary creature, right? You start to go off on this combo and they kill your legendary creature. It makes it harder for them. They had to try to find a way to have mana then. And, you can kind of stop this whole thing in its tracks. Well, thanks to Mox Opal, you no longer have to have the creature aspect. You just have to have, 2 other artifacts besides Mox Opal. So you can just have a Mox Amber lying around. You can have a Mishra's Bauble lying around. Any of these other artifacts, So this really Grinding Station, Mox Opal, and then a Mox Amber, and you can go off now without needing the creature interaction. So it gains them a lot of edge to move forward. They're no longer reliant on creatures as a whole. So as it stands now, they're playing 4 Tamiyo, 4 Emery, just the best creatures they can play. Tamiyo lets them draw more cards. It helps you get to investigate, put a clue token in, helps turn on your Mox Opals. Thassa's Oracle's obviously there for the combo kill, and Emery lets you rebuy all your artifacts. That being said, we still are playing Preordain, Unholy Heat as ways to remove things. This one's playing a Flame of Venor, Sink into Super as a good bounce spell, and Malevolent Rumble as a way to go buy back anything we need, as well as start filling up our graveyard. Just good. Like I said, we're playing Mox Opal. Mox Ambers are mana ramp spells. We're playing Mr. Bauble because it's a free spell we get to cast. Especially with Emery just being able to draw extra cards a turn. 1 Engineer Explosive, 1 Aether Spellbomb, 1 Soul Guide Lantern, and then the 3 Grinding Stations we need to play, along with 4 Underworld Breaches. Notably, we are a 4 Urza Saga deck as well. That's why you see so many the other kind of fun one-ofs like the Aether Spellbomb, Soul Guide Lantern, things like that. Just ways to get going. This deck also gained a lot because the fact that you don't have to combo kill to kill your opponent. It turns out making a bunch of Urza Saga tokens is really powerful and very strong against what our opponent's doing, especially when we have a bunch of these random artifacts laying down. So when we're making 5/5s, 7/7, or 5/5, 6/6s, 7/7s, that's just a lot for our opponent to deal with. They easily can't deal with all that. On top of being able to have to, they have to hold up mana, they have to interact with us, make sure we're not just comboing off. You can fight the game plan of Urza Saga, make a bunch of tokens, your opponent answers that, like, okay, well, Underworld Breach, Grinding Station, kill you. I'm glad you dealt with my creatures, but you didn't deal with my combo. Or you dealt with my combo, you brought in a bunch of sideboard cards against that, and just beat you down with Urza Saga tokens. So it is kind of crazy to see this deck kind of come back up out of not retirement, because it was seeing play before before Mox Opal got unbanned. So deck is still doing well. It's just doing better now. It's in a much better position. A lot of people think this is the best deck in the format to be playing. I do have to agree with them. I think it has a lot of edge. And I think if you have the Mox Opals and you have the time to really practice and get down, figure out what you're doing with this deck, that's where you want to be for sure. It has a lot of gameplay, has a lot of things you can do, and it's doing super well. It keeps putting up numbers consistently, it keeps 5-0ing. So clearly the deck is good and here to stay. The biggest problem with this deck, though, is that you need 4 Mox Opals. You don't have those, that's going to cost you a lot of money, and a lot of people can't afford just to drop, $800 on a place of Mox Opals. That's a lot to do. But I do think this is going to be one of those decks that has a small meta share in the RCs with a great, conversion to day 2 and probably putting up a number in the top 8, if not top 16 and 32 for sure. So we'll just have to wait and see how many people actually play Grinding Station, how many people have access to Mox Opal, and how many people have the time to do the reps in with the deck as well. And then the final deck, we're talking about Amulet Titan here. This is a list that Ryan Hayes recently piloted to a first place finish at the 5K in the Atlanta, SCG-Con Atlanta, or the Spotlight Series Atlanta, whatever they want to call it. This deck has not changed too much recently. It did lose the One Ring, which was a big loss to it, but it did also gain Green Sun Zenith, which is kind of why a lot of people thought this deck, or this card would never get unbanned, because Green Sun Zenith was just immediately going to go into the Primeval Titan decks, or Primetime. Or Amulet Titan, we all knew this was going to happen, or I would say a majority of Magic players knew this was going to happen. It's kind of what we expected to see. And we've seen now, Amulet Titan resurge and do well. They are now playing a little bit of a different combo instead of just going and getting Primeval Titan along with having a Dryad out and killing you with Valakut combo kills or bunch of damage like that. Excuse me. They now have an infinite loop they can do where they can keep making copies of Primeval Titan or copies of Lumra and kind of mill themselves out and just kind of set up this whole combo kill with just making a million Primeval Titans, things like that. It's a little convoluted. I don't fully understand it. I'm not going to pretend that I do. I just know that I've seen it go off. I've seen that you can do it. It is weirdly annoying to watch happen because they will do it kind of out of nowhere where they have, maybe they'll have one Spelunking or one Amulet of Vigor out, and next thing you know, you're just watching them make a million mana and do all these just essential BS situation. But it is a deck that can kind of play from any position in the game. It got better by having Green Sun Zenith, now being able to go grab, Aftermath Analyst, a Dryad Arbor if it needs to, Dryad, Lumra, or Primeval Titan. Just, has all these now tutor targets to go hit. Obviously, it got better with the Graveyard as well, being able to grab, Collector Oof if they need it, or anything like that. The deck has gotten better. It's still very powerful, very good. We're gonna have to wait and see how well this deck actually translates into paper. Obviously we did just see someone take it down in a paper event with this deck, but have to wait and see how well this actually pops up in the RCs. See if a lot of people join on this bandwagon or if people go towards a different route. Obviously, Amulet Titan is going to have a target on its head. People are going to be prepared for it, or at least know about it, what's going on with it. It's not going to be some unknown deck that comes out and takes out the tournament out of left field. Definitely going to have graveyard hate and other hate for this deck. It's not going to be too surprising to see that happen. That being said, this deck can lose. I've beaten it before. I've used to beat it with Rhinos all the time. You can interact with the deck. You can turn them down or slow them down. You can stop them. There's ways to do it. Whether like with Boros Energy, if they're bringing in, having Blood Moons, just slowing them down that way while still beating them down. Dimir Murktide can do it by beating them down, holding up counter spells, interacting with them that way. Eldrazi Ramp can go a little faster than them, interact with them in the other ways from their sideboard. Casting casting Emrakul, Promise End, and just kind of blowing up their hand by putting their bounce lanes into play, so they're not getting extra value off of that with Amulet Vigor. Just kind of like messing up their next turn. Grinding stations can just kill them before they kill them. Situation. So this deck is not the end all be all. It's not the greatest deck you can be playing, but it is a very solid deck and very hard to interact with because it comes at you from so many different angles. But this is kind of like the top 5 decks right now in Modern, at least the 5 most played decks in Modern. Just kind of going over them, explaining Modern to you guys. Obviously, if you've been playing Modern a lot, or you deep into Modern, this video isn't probably going to be for you. It's not going to really help you out any more than what you didn't already know. But I always do like to kind of cater to everybody, kind of help people understand who maybe aren't going to the RCs or maybe just starting their RC testing. Kind of help you understand what's going on in Modern and what's kind of happened since the bannings. But as always, guys, if you like what you're seeing, you like what I'm doing, go ahead and leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out, and let me know what you guys are testing or taking or wanting to see at the next RCs. I'd love to hear from you. Catch you guys next time.